Hi everyone, today I'm covering Powkiddy's latest micro console, the Q36. After Powkiddy's last micro console, the A30, left me disappointed, I was slightly hesitant getting the Q36 to be honest, but can thankfully say that it's in a league of its own. Well, I say that, but actually it's very much in the Pacific League of the FunKey S, being a hardware spec and software clone of the Gameboy Advance SP-inspired micro handheld that was released last year. Inside the box, we've got the usual charge cable instructions included alongside the handheld itself, as well as a little wrist strap. Overall, it's above the usual plain white packaging. There's not a lot of wasted space inside and gets you to the handheld super quickly. Straight out of the box, Powkiddy's Q36 certainly earns the mini in its name. This Game Gear inspired handheld is tiny. Overall, build quality is pretty decent. It doesn't feel like it's going to crumble in your hand, there's no sharp edges, it doesn't make a load of noise while shaken, and there's no obvious bad points to the actual hardware design. The finish isn't perfect though. I'm not sure if it comes across in YouTube's video compression, but there's slight imperfections around the joins of the handheld, and specifically the speaker grill. It doesn't ruin the experience while in use, as the handheld's so small that while playing on it you'll never actually see them. And it feels robust enough in the hand, so it's not like the actual build quality is bad. It's more the finish or the attention to detail to the finish, and those finishing touches just aren't perfect. Overall, it'll likely not make the first row of your display case, but it's more than good enough for actually playing and taking around with you wherever you go, which is ultimately the whole point of these micro handhelds. The layout of the handheld itself is super efficient with absolutely no space wasted. You've only got the USB-C, micro SD and 2 shoulder buttons on top, which might sound like a missed opportunity, but ultimately you mainly want to focus on playing on handheld games on the Q36 to make the most of its tiny screen. So really it only becomes an issue when playing those PlayStation 1 games that make use of all 4 shoulder buttons within quick succession of one another. When it comes to micro handhelds, I always have the preconception that the controls will always be less comfortable than a full-size controller, obviously as everything's more crammed in by design. The Game Gear the Q36 is heavily inspired on does have a really good form factor to be shrunken down to this kind of size though, except for the shoulder buttons, which of course weren't there on the original Game Gear, and they are the most uncomfortable inputs to use in pretty much any scenario while using the Q36. They're just not comfortable to get to or use efficiently. So it really is best to focus your gameplay on games that won't require them, as honestly the rest of the inputs aren't actually that bad. Obviously the spacing between the buttons are limited, so it's not uncommon to accidentally press multiple inputs simultaneously, but they've each got a comfortable press to them, and while holding the handheld in a way where you're pretty much ignoring the shoulder buttons, it's a relatively comfortable experience for a micro handheld. The D-pad's got a surprising amount of depth to it, which really works to its favour in a single directional input, but the available travel in the D-pad is very limited, which makes multi-directional input pretty difficult. It's both a blessing and a curse in real-world scenarios, as it makes the earlier 4-directional handheld or platformer games a lot easier to play, but I personally found it pretty tricky to pull off combos in fighting games consistently. So overall, considering you've only got a 1.54-inch IPS screen to work with, and how mini the Q36 Mini actually is, the controls aren't too bad at all for a micro handheld. But the software side is really where the Q36 stands out, and that's all thanks to the frankly amazing work the FunKey S team did with their original OS. Thanks to their hard work, the Q36 are one of those rare exceptions, like the FunKey S was, where everything just works perfectly out of the box, no tweaks required. The menus are simple to use, the power button cleverly doubles up as the software menu key, everything's self-explanatory and easy to use straight from turning the handheld on. Speaking of which, it boots in seconds, there's no massive waits anywhere within the software side, so the FunKey S team really should be applauded here. Adding new games is a simple matter of dragging and dropping the files onto the micro SD cards in the right folder, and emulation support goes all the way up to PlayStation 1, obviously matching the FunKey S's support. It's hilariously awesome playing PlayStation 1 games on the 1.54-inch screen, which is set at a 1:1 screen ratio, which technically obviously affects the system scaling, but to be honest, on such a small screen it all becomes a case of making the most of the tiny screen over getting that pixel perfect scaling. So I'll leave you to some gameplay now and summarise up at the end. So all in all, Powkiddy's Q36 isn't a bad option at all when it comes to picking up a micro console. The cost has floated around the $50 mark, which if you're after a micro handheld specifically, isn't too bad of a deal. If you're wanting a mini but not tiny handheld, then the Miu Mini is worth checking out. But if you're out for a micro handheld, then you're likely not going to be disappointed with the Powkiddy's Q36. So that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching.